So for our question time panel, which feature from your competitors do you most envy and wish you had in your own browser? Who wants to start?
The IE6 rendering engine.
Actually, he's almost serious in that if Firefox had a built-in copy of the IE6 rendering engine, we could probably capture that market share, which is still stuck on IE6, right? Because all their proprietary internal intranet sites would still work. No, maybe not.
So I think it's the case of Firefox. It's I'm looking at you. I think multiprocess is still something we're looking for in Firefox. I think it's really important to have this, right? So yeah, multiprocess in case of Firefox.
I think I would have said advanced audio, but which is something that Mozilla's had for a long time, but now there is something in Chrome, although I think it's still more advanced in Firefox. I suppose there are some things. The Zool model for extensions gives you the ability to do things that you can't yet do in Chrome, because like I was saying this morning, for extensions, Chrome is more task-oriented and anticipating about what are all the main use cases versus Zool that just opens up the whole browser.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that Chrome has going for it is the multi-process aspect as well, and the process separation of plugins, and the stability that provides to the browser. So I think that's really interesting.
Given that I'm a complete CSS junkie, I really love some of the CSS3 features that the WebKit-based browsers have, like the animations, and hopefully we'll get those soon, but not soon enough for my liking. So.
Why are people reinventing their own widgets rather than using the W3C standard for widgets?
Don't ask me. Okay, answer
that. He was fastest. No. Okay. We've seen JSON-based packaging of application for Chrome Web Store, and I think Mozilla is also creating their own manifest format for extensions. But the W3C widgets spec is probably 90% there, and it's supposed to be extensible. So why are you not trying to follow the existing standard?
I can say in the case of Chrome, I think there were potentially two options, and they went with one or the other, where both had strengths and weaknesses. And I think that it was basically building on the extension framework, so that you have the idea of packaged apps that are apps and using the kinds of things widgets do, but they also are very closely tied in with the extension framework. I think the way things have gone is that it's very much, if you look at most of the apps on the store, they're at least at the moment, they've been hosted apps. So maybe you could argue that there it's closer aligned with widgets, but it's the kind of thing where it was a case of getting it out and seeing what people did with it, and then hopefully evolving it and trying to tie in with something like that as a standard, or trying to evolve it into some other standard. So there's definitely always the intent to keep these things and make them more standard, but it was a case of just getting it out there, seeing what people do with it, and evolving it.
Also, so for your information, I know that we have an implementation of the W3C widgets. It's an extension, but it's not good. I think the answer of this question in our case is widgets are cool, but that's not all. That's not everything. So why do you need widgets, right?
I don't mean widgets as in UI, but as a concept where you have a zip file with a bunch of HTML
so
and a manifest file.
Yeah, you're talking like Prism, the Prism-like application and stuff like that. Yeah, I understand that. But so we're working on web apps these days. Chrome has an app store. We're working on an app store too, and we're gonna have it. I mean, do you think we just need this zip mechanism with files inside? I think we need something more complex than that, with coming with APIs, and I mean, I think it's more complex than just the W3C widget specification. I think it's not enough. And I don't think it's covering all the needs today and the future needs, really. I know this specification, I know how it works. I think packaging maybe is not the right way to do it. Maybe we want to transform just a web page to an application. I'm talking about something we're working on these days. But when you have Twitter on my phone, right? Maybe I want to use Twitter as an application. Maybe I don't want to go through the widgets things to have Twitter, a Twitter web page as an application. Maybe I just want just a button and transform this web page as an application, right? I think all this stuff covering, you know, the installation of process of a web page as an application and bringing APIs, the new APIs and all the things, also the permission system. There's a lot of things that are not covered by the widget specification. I think we need more than that, really.
Not really, because we do use the W3 widget spec, and in fact we wrote it, pretty much.
Next question, please. In a theoretical world where all browsers render things in a standard way, is browser user experience the only way to complete? So if each of you guys supported exactly the same parts of the HTML5 spec, how would you choose between browsers?
Not entirely. Speed would also be a way to compete. But user experience considered broadly, yes. I think there are still philosophical differences between the way different browsers approach sort of a user's interaction with the web, and the way I think it works, and the chap from Chrome will feel free to disagree with me, is that Chrome is a window on the web. That is to say, it wants you to see through it. The web page is the thing. The browser just gets out of the way. It's as simple as possible. And I think of Firefox more as like your butler. It stands behind your chair, you know, not getting in your way, but suddenly when you need something, here you are, sir. It's there. You see what I mean? It's more, you know, it assists I think in more ways, and therefore, so I think there are different models. So yes, user experience in the broadest sense, perhaps, yeah, but that's also hypothesis contrary to fact. It's like, you know, if the moon was made of green cheese, then what would this be? Well,
yeah, that's what strikes me. Is it is a very theoretical proposition, because the browsers will always evolve and choose different features and evolve at a different pace.
Also for competition, you have where the browser is running. We all support like Linux, Mac, Windows, and some phones, and look at Opera. They're running just everywhere, right? It's another way to have a competition, right? It's where you manage to make your browser running.
There are quite a few other aspects. So you mentioned speed. There's also other things like security, and there's also the whole developer experience and how do developers hook into all these things, like with extensions and apps and stuff.
Right. And in the case of mobile as well, it's definitely about security, speed, but also about how well do you implement things for battery life and to minimize network traffic. And that kind of thing, like those types of differentiators exist today between all of the different WebKit browsers, which effectively render things more or less in the same way.
Yeah, and that sort of goes into what I was saying earlier in my talk, all about, you know, streamlining. He has before even had any beers at all. Streamlining the way that your browsers run and making them small enough footprints so they'll run on older operating systems. Because if you look at the Eastern European countries and a lot of even more developing countries, a lot of the spanking new hardware that we use for a year then throw away will end up in those countries. And we need to consider, you know, people who haven't got the latest operating systems and things like that as well. And that also goes onto the mobile space, you know, people that use slightly less powerful feature phones as well as the latest smartphones. And that's what we always try and do with our browsers, is making sure we can consider all of those folk as well as just the people in the US and the UK and Western Europe.
As an IT manager at a London university, I recognise that I am a dinosaur. IT services are often run by middle-aged men using email and SMS and out in touch with communication methods and browsers of today, and the audience is a different generation. Is this a barrier to change? All right, a barrier to innovation, maybe, I don't know.
can we do about it? Very hard, isn't it? I mean, I spend a lot of my time going into universities and colleges and trying to improve the way that they teach web design and improve the set of browsers that they've got installed on their systems. And there's so many varying factors that present a barrier to actually pushing things forward. You know, sometimes in terms of getting the browsers installed, it will be something along the lines of the system administrator guy knows how to administrate and make IE6 secure really, really well. Therefore, his job his attitude is that it's not broke, so why should I fix it? Which of course creates problems for people that want to actually get new browsers on the system, and also with the teachers. Like actually teaching web design stuff, a lot of the current curricula were written 15 years ago, but they just haven't had the knowledge and the money to update it since then. So these kind of things are going to be an issue for a very long time, because it's hard to just get stuff changed quickly. You know, it has to go through 4 different committees.
And in terms of the difficulty is, of course, that he says if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The only way he's ever going to fix it if it does break. And if it does break, it means that people like you are going to have to write websites that don't work in IE6. And of course, there is pressure not to do that because, you know, you don't want to be throwing customers on the floor. And I had an idea about, I don't know, 12, 18 months ago and never kind of got around to implementing it or being able to put enough oomph behind it. But the idea was a thing called Death of IE6 Day. And the way that it would work would be that sites would say that we are no longer committing to support IE6 beyond date, where date was about 6 months after the launch of the campaign, right? We're not saying we're not going to support it, we're not committing to support it, right? Then you have a website that lists all of the sites of all of the companies that committed this, and it gets longer and longer and longer, right? And then you send this to your IT guy, and you go, okay, you can do 2 things. You can check that there is no site on here that is business critical for us. Here is a list of 5,000 sites. Or you can just upgrade our browser. At that point, they go, there's a big risk here. If one of those sites is really important to someone high up in my organization, I could be stuffed. Maybe I should upgrade the browser. That was my thought.
I mean, it's a nice thought. I like your way of thinking there, but it's not even that simple, is it? Because quite often you'll have a great big company which is stuck on IE6 because one of their critical accounting systems or something will only work on IE6, and a middle manager paid £250,000 for it 10 years ago and won't admit that he was wrong.
Well, this is an awesome opportunity for Opera, Chrome, or Firefox, right? Because installing multiple copies of IE on the same machine is kind of difficult. Whereas, you know, installing an alternative browser alongside.
Yeah.
And this is where Chrome Frame comes in, actually.
That's a good
so,
point.
So it's sort of for solving. Just by the way. I mean, what I've seen is there are two kinds of. It's helpful in all these sort of situations to understand the motivations and the fears of these people who are making decisions. And what I've seen is that there are 2 kinds of two rationales for keeping IE6. One is because people have some sort of idea that it's secure or whatever fantasy they want to entertain, and the other is simply the legacy problem. And so for that second case, where they're bound to IE6, even though they know full well there is a big bright world of modern browsers out, that's the sort of scenario where Chrome Frame can help.
So Microsoft could actually, they've recently launched a site, I don't know if any of you saw it, which is designed to help with this problem. But the biggest thing that they could do to help with this problem, someone blogged this and I thought this was awesome, was just take the IE6 binary and repackage it as a standalone download, right, for later versions of Windows, right? So if you need IE6 for your web app, then you have this purpose-built binary that works with that web app. It's like a Citrix viewer or some kind of viewer for that web app, and you just use the IE6 binary for that, and that's all that it does. But the system browser is something more modern, IE8, IE9, Firefox, Chrome, whatever, right? If they were to package it up that way and de-entangle it from the operating system, so that, you know, any version of Windows could install this sort of standalone statically linked IE6 binary, then I think that would remove a lot of the barriers to having IE6 as the default set browser. But of course, there may be political or technical reasons why they wouldn't want to do that. But it would be, I think it would make a big difference.
Can I just come back, because I'm the old man there that wrote that out. But I think one of the problems is, you know, I was brought up with the telephone, this, that, and the other. I've been in IT for 30 years. There's a big difference between the 50-year-olds that are making the decisions that are still, you know, have got no understanding of this technology or very little, compared with my sons and daughters that seem to, you know, to take to it like ducks in water. I think a lot of it's down to the fact that probably my generation just don't understand the benefits. But also I think, especially in the university sector, sometimes we just don't ask what the customers really want. And we've had that before where we've announced an email policy for all, and all the students just laughed at us because none of them used email. They're all using this Twitter, this, that, and the other. And I think it's a matter you've got to ask the youth of the day and understand what's driving today's customer.
Well, in terms of browser upgrades, there's a difference between understanding the need for a more modern browser and understanding the need for some of the communications tools that, as you say, the youth of today are using. I mean, I personally, this may be a controversial view, think that Twitter is pretty much a gigantic waste of time and space.
OH.
A few people agree with me, right? But, I don't have to understand or appreciate that some people get value out of Twitter to know that a browser needs an upgrade. Or I don't have to have a Facebook account to know that a browser might need an upgrade. So I think the problems that you talk about are not the same problem.
Sorry.
If you have a phone, we're getting interference on the audio. You might have heard the clicking noises from somebody's phone. So could you make sure if you've got a phone, particularly if you're not using it, you turn it off because it's interfering with recording the session. Thank you. Okay.
Over here.
Sorry.
Hi. Sorry. Can
sorry.
I time for one more question?
Oh, well, for that
Sorry.
one. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm real sorry. It's really cool having all you guys here, but sometimes when you come to events like this, you kind of realize that you're in a utopian world. And one of the things that I never really hear from you is putting into perspective money. Because the reason why a lot of people are not upgrading is money. It's the cost of upgrading. It's not just, oh, let's just update the browser. And until you can figure in and factor in the cost of money, the cost of upgrading, then we're all just talking here as people who are knowledgeable and know that, yeah, we want the latest, fanciest browser. But in organizations, that's not going to happen. So how do you think, or what is the sort of method that you think you can use to get in there and talk to them about money?
Well, the cost of upgrading doesn't necessarily go down. The way people keep it low is that they upgrade infrequently, so that they incur that cost not very often, which means that, and we do see this, over time, eventually, this IE6 kind of body of users will slowly decrease. And these are people who don't incur the cost of upgrading very often. But the other way that the money balance changes is when the cost of staying where you are increases in terms of increased user support, increased difficulty with patches, your operating system goes out of support, your browser goes out of support, your boxes get rooted because your browser has a hole.
Additional development complexity.
Yeah, additional development complexity. So there's not, I don't think, much we can do to, I mean, we can't really make it cheaper for an enterprise to upgrade all of its desktops, right? Because the costs involved with that are not things within our control.
Okay, this one's specifically for Firefox, but we can maybe talk about vendor prefixes in general. Which CSS3 features can we drop the vendor prefixes from when Firefox 4 is released?
So text shadow, box shadow, the background size, background position, and we still have it for transitions, transformations, and gradients. I think that's all.
The resource you need to answer this kind of question is developer.mozilla.org. It is an awesome web development resource, and you should all use it. It doesn't just cover Firefox; it'll tell you, proper documentation for JavaScript. Yeah. Join the campaign.
About CSS3, so we wrote a blog post about where we dropped the extensions on hacks.mozilla.org. And if we drop another extension, we're going to blog about it on this blog post. And and we have on developer.mozilla.org, we have a we have a list of stuff that changed between Firefox 3.6 and 4.
For Chrome, I can't remember if it's on that URL I gave today, 3ly/Chrome status, but if not, I'll make it an action to see if we can actually get some information on that there.
Chrome still, sorry, go ahead.
This is a Firefox question. You said you weren't going to change the engine between 5, 6, 7. So does that mean there won't be any dropping of prefixes before the next engine release?
If we drop a prefix, it's going to be for Firefox 7. I mean, I think so. I mean, so far, from what I know from the roadmap, we're not planning to drop anything. Maybe gradients, I don't know. But
the reason you have a prefix is either because the implementation is not complete or because the standard is not complete, right? If it turned out that we'd implemented a draft standard and we'd done a really good job of it, and the standard became final and was exactly the same as what we'd implemented, and therefore switching wasn't a case of changing any code and just dropping the prefix, who knows? I don't think there's a policy on this, is all I'm saying.
And whatever happened, I mean, if we decide to drop a prefix, we still keep the version with the prefix. Okay, so it's not going to break anything.
Is HTML5 at the moment a backward step for accessibility? Browsers can be upgraded, but assistive technology is still expensive. And HTML5 support in assistive technology is poor.
That's an interesting one. I don't particularly think of so much because there are free screen readers available, and a lot of the implementations in HTML5 are written to have improved accessibility out of the box. You know, for example, the HTML5 video players are keyboard accessible out of the box. A lot of the new form elements are keyboard accessible out of the box, which is basically just getting rid of quite a lot of work that you previously had to do to make that sort of stuff accessible. And at least it means that for companies that don't particularly care so much about accessibility, which is quite a few people, at least that stuff is given away for free anyway.
Video player, I think, still doesn't support captioning officially.
Oh well, the captioning. There is. We've got an implementation of WebSRT now, so it is coming. The track element and all that stuff, it is coming along.
And on the particular issue of captioning, a quick plug for universalsubtitles.org, which is a Mozilla drumbeat project, which is basically about putting translations and captions on every single video on the internet, eventually. So yeah, if you are putting up a video on your website and you want people to be able to caption it, then use their infrastructure. It's pretty cool.
It is very cool. I agree.
And at a high level, and I think accessibility is a very nuanced concept, and you know, HTML5 is helping to replace what were previously black boxes, you know, just binary holes of Flash or desktop apps that have no content whatsoever. HTML5 is basically embracing the general concept of the web, which is markup plus styling. So this is where people sort of talk about Canvas being the new Flash and not having all that. But as far as many of the core elements of this and the fact that, for instance, with font face, we can do text now instead of actually just storing it in another black box of just images generated on Photoshop. There is a lot that this is actually helping with accessibility as well. And things like also what you were talking about today, web forms, you know, and microdata. There's a lot more about being declarative, and that is all hopefully useful for the screen readers of the future as well, albeit that they do have to be upgraded at a cost.
And these days there's a group working on accessibility for Canvas 2. They're talking these days, so it's going to have something for Canvas 2, so I think it's way better. I mean, I'm just thinking about not having to use Flash plus the forms, just these things. It's a big change for accessibility.
And I'd add that AT does tend to have much better support for YARIA nowadays. So even where it doesn't support HTML5 forms, you can add attributes to your, you know, JavaScript slider widgets or whatever that will tell assistive technology that this is not a div or a span, this is actually a slider. And assistive technology understands that.
There's actually one other HTML5 feature which hasn't been mentioned at all today, which will be a big boon for accessibility, and that is the additional semantic element. So when you know what's a sidebar, what's a section, what's the main part of a page, it allows a screen reader to jump directly to the content rather than having to sort of plow through a mess of, you know, div class equals this, div ID equals that. And also, the additional power of CSS3 means generally less HTML markup. You have more power in your styling, you need less structural elements, and that's got to be a win for accessibility as well.
Yeah, something that we recommend that you do if if you're worried about the screen reader support for the new semantic elements, is use the new semantic elements, but also put the Y-ARIA attributes on them as well, just to give that extra step of backwards compatibility.
Landmark roles are pretty well supported now, so
they
if
are.
you do role equals content, or I can't remember what the names are, role equals navigation is definitely.
Of course, another thing to add is that regardless of what tools you're using, it's still possible to completely screw up the accessibility of a site. So it's really down to the implementation, completely aside from the actual particular version of HTML you're using. So,
thanks, Jim. Yeah, this is my question. I appreciate HTML5, will provide all those things you've just talked about, and with the point about NVDA, it is getting better all the time. From my experience, that where people are using JAWS, it's because it supports other things besides a web browser, which of course in the real world other people are doing things other than browsing with the web. And I think if NVDA can actually improve to actually incorporate other applications as well, then I think the gap will fill quite quickly. But it's a concern I have that, like with costs of like upgrading JAWS is a lot of money, and that's why there's going to, we talked about the IE6 lag. There's going to be screen reader lag for the same reasons. So thanks.
Mobile browsers. How far are your mobile browsers behind your desktop equivalent, and what are the main differences?
So I have a list.
It's quite a short list, isn't it?
So the thing is, in Firefox 4, for mobile, we have the same engine, right? But we have multi-process, and some features in the case of Firefox 4 are not working very well in the multi-process world. So we don't have IndexedDB in this phone yet. We have some troubles with video. It's not working perfectly well, but that's something else. The thing is, there's a lot of different phones, right? So I have one here, and we have the one there. And WebGL sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So WebGL sometimes, video sometimes, and IndexedDB every time, in our case. Yep.
And the other way, for Firefox for mobile, we have stuff which we don't have on the desktop, like the multi-process for now, as well as the notification thing.
Yeah. And do we support geolocation on the desktop in Firefox 4?
Yep.
Okay, we do. A little while back it was just in mobile, but I guess it's now in both.
This is a really easy question for me because we only make mobile browsers.
Hey.
But I think what's interesting is that the mobile browsers that we do have...
Like the difference between your mobile browser and your desktop browser are vast.
They're huge.
Vast. We need to fix that.
It's interesting though, if you look at what we have on our latest devices, like the tablets that we're coming out with, the capabilities are actually very, very close to desktop capabilities, period. So they're starting to get really, really close together, even though we don't have our own equivalent of a desktop browser. But compared to the other vendors, our mobile browsers are actually very strong.
With Opera, we pretty much keep it as close as possible between the mobile and the desktop rendering engines. It effectively uses the same engine for each equivalent version. It's just that we might have some of the features turned off in mobile due to performance reasons. Things like, do you want to have a massive, great big sprawling animation transition flying around on your mobile screen? Probably not, and it tends to slow it down quite a lot on some phones. So, especially on Opera Mini, which is designed for allowing people on lower power feature phones to actually browse the internet. And also, because of the way Mini works, because it's a proxy-based browser, it doesn't have the actual rendering done on the device itself. It has that done on a server farm. And then the server farm actually sends a properly formatted, compressed version of the web page. And it's like a snapshot of the page in the current state. It's similar to PDF in concept. But because of that, it means that it doesn't do so well in things like when you've got lots of constant JavaScript background processes and Ajax updates and things like that. It doesn't deal with stuff like that too well. But then again, that's the point of Opera Mini is not to have a wickedly cool, just like the desktop experience. It's to have an experience that can be used even on pretty old, crappy feature phones to a reasonable degree.
And with Chrome, there is no actual Chrome on mobile. It's not a trivial problem to actually port a browser like Chrome that has to work with all these latest features that on the various desktop operating systems, and then to have to worry about porting that onto mobile operating systems as well. So it is progressing. There are things like in Honeycomb, SVG, and some of the device APIs are there now, so you can do webcam or recording from the camera. But it's slowly progressing. It's not actually the same browser.
Hey, dude, you're not doing too badly. At least you ship your browser for all the operating systems your company makes.
Two.
Yeah. Unlike some.
I think we actually know the answer to this one, but we'll ask it anyway. How come we have an Opera browser? Because I think Chris just answered this. How come we have an Opera browser on iPhone but not Firefox?
Okay, so we don't have Opera Mobile on iPhone, we have Opera Mini. The reason we were allowed to sneak Opera Mini onto the iPhone is because
somebody's phone interfering really badly with the audio. So
who's tweeting? Stop it!
Is it possibly someone's iPad or someone's 3G modem?
Thank you.
That's better. So, yeah, the reason we managed to sneak Opera Mini onto the iPhone but not Opera Mobile is because, as I said before, it's a proxy-based browser that doesn't render stuff on the desktop, so it doesn't duplicate the functionality of the WebKit browser that's already on there, and that's the only reason we were allowed to have Opera Mini on the iPhone.
Yeah, there are a number of restrictions on Apple's App Store. For those of you who weren't here earlier, the only way you can get apps onto the iPhone is through the Apple App Store. The Apple App Store has certain restrictions on the sort of applications it will ship. Two of the restrictions are, first of all, it must not be duplicative of existing function, as the gentleman was saying. But the second of which is that it's not allowed to download and run code of its own, because that would allow you to download and run arbitrary stuff, and Apple feel upset by that prospect. And of course, a web browser's entire purpose, pretty much, is
allowing to have control of your own device or computer.
Well, like indeed, you pays your money and you takes your choice,
exactly.
as I was saying earlier. So that is why, if you think that this is unreasonable, then I'm sure that Steve at apple.com would be pleased to hear your complaints.
I was just wondering, on the BlackBerry platform, what's the policy with other browsers?
I mean, in general, the browser on BlackBerry is the BlackBerry browser. There are options, other options. You can run Opera on
Mini
BlackBerry.
Or mobile?
Both. Is it just Mini or is it mobile? I can't remember, to be honest.
I mean, it's something that can be downloaded and put on a BlackBerry, but by default, now going forward, it's the WebKit BlackBerry browser.
How high do vendors imagine version numbers going before an alternative naming convention is adopted, like with Android?
For a short time, I thought there was kind of like a rule of 10. When an application got to version sort of 9, it either kind of died or transformed to something else. See Mac OS, Netscape almost, various things. But now Chrome got to 10 successfully, so I guess my kind of rule of thumb is gone.
Chrome will be way ahead of us in a few months in terms of version.
Yeah, what's Android's system? Someone? Oh, I see. Right, but they have numbers too, right? So Gingerbread is 2.3 and so on and so forth. I mean, everyone has code names. We have code names. We name ours after parks, as in like national parks in different countries around the world, which is kind of cool. And Thunderbird names theirs after beaches. Yeah, numbers are numbers.
Yeah, I want to reach Firefox 42.
I think we're going to start moving in steps of 10 now.
Yeah, we missed out on shipping Firefox Pi. We went from 3.1.4 to 3.1.5. Bit of a shame.
HTML5 video can't currently stream live video. In my opinion, this is one of the real problems with it. With the exception of Apple Safari, will WebM catch up and finally support proper video streaming?
So it's difficult. It's a complex. It's a complex topic. So today, what you can do is to have progress in download. So what you can do is to stream, do live streaming with WebM. It's possible today. But it's not super efficient. First, because it's through HTTP, and second, because you know, I mean, it's. So we're working on something based on RTP. There's something coming. I saw on your your bug tracker for Chrome, they are working on something. We are working on something too, to have an IP-based streaming mechanism.
Actually, a slight quibble with the question. Of course, HTML5 video is codec agnostic. There are other codecs, and I watch Air Mozilla every week on OGG streaming video. So you can do it.
But this is not progressive download, and
if you're asking about WebM, then that answer is the correct one.
So yeah, so the thing is, you don't want progressive download. You want adaptative streaming, and you don't want HTTP. So right now we're not ready yet. I mean, HTML5 is not ready yet, but we're all working on it. Google is working on it. We're working on it.
I wasn't sure we were asking. Is there an official list or specification chart dealing what each of the browsers do? For instance, Firefox can provide a WebKit for audio API as well as Chrome, which Opera can't do, whilst Chrome can provide offline storage caching.
Can I plug developer.mozilla.org again, please?
Yes. So the thing is, we are planning to, we're working on something. So developer.mozilla.org, it sounds like a Mozilla website. It's a Mozilla website, yes, but we are planning to integrate more data from other browsers. We're working with Google on it. We want to have more, I mean, exactly this, to be able to understand what you can use today in which browser, and how also we're thinking about adding some ways to work around a lack of a feature, for example. So it's the plan. We already, right now, we're changing a bit how the pages work to allow to have a big table on top of the documentation to say, okay, you can use this here, not here, stuff like that.
And a couple of other resources are html5readiness.com and when can I use, which you'd have to Google it.
Yeah.
Caniuse.com or something.
Caniuse.com, best website ever.
And you can use for the BlackBerry stuff, you can use the BlackBerry developer forums to get lists and answer any questions for our support for WebKit and what other features that we offer in our browser.
We have dev.opera.com, which is the site that I maintain and publish stuff on, and we also have separate docs sites. So the first one is more kind of tutorials, and the second one is just dry kind of support reference stuff. But we've started pointing all of the reference stuff towards the relevant articles that cover those features in more details, and in pretty much all of our tutorials we talk about which browsers support those different things. We try to make all of our demos as cross-browser as possible.
In what way is Google App Store different from this site works best in Netscape 4 or Internet Explorer 4? Are we just reinventing sandboxing?
A few things. Well, the Chrome Web Store is supposed to be promoting standard web apps. You can put Flash apps in if you want. You can put Java apps if the user's got them installed. You can do what you like. But the things that we're most interested in, I think, are the ones that will work on other browsers and work outside of the web store, even on Chrome. It's just that it does actually have these extra powers. It's got the ability to do payments. It's got there's a new feature like background. So you can, in that sense, progressively enhance it. Maybe those things will become standards in the future, but because it's such a new concept, it's really just out there to try them out now. But certainly, there's no problem with putting an app in that's just a standard web app that's using complete web standards. It can still, plenty of those sorts of apps have been featured as long as it fits the criteria of being a rich web app with all the sorts of things that users are looking for.
So I think our vision on this point is a little different. We'd like to see competing stores offering web applications rather than having one built into the browser. We're hoping to offer software and services in support of that vision, but I guess that would mean that we wouldn't be kind of saying Firefox goes to this particular web store. And there's also hope that people will be able to self-publish applications. They just put metadata on their page about their application, and that might get picked up by people who are populating web stores with applications according to their own criteria. So I think our vision is of a broader ecosystem of stores, and sort of as markets work, sort of reputation of various stores goes up, reputation of other stores goes down. Some stores become known for being discerning or for particular areas, and so on and so forth. So we think a sort of an open web store model is what we'd like to see.
In terms of our add-ons sites, so our widgets page and our extensions pages and things like that, we don't have any restrictions that say you have to download the stuff from that store. You can publish an Opera extension or widget pretty much anywhere and download it and install it. It's just that we recommend that people get the stuff from that page, because stuff that goes through and is published on that page has had a definite, decent QA procedure done on it and is guaranteed to not have anything horrible inside it. So.
Yeah, and for our platform as well, we have obviously our own store, the App World, but I mean, there are definitely security implications with allowing other web applications on, especially a BlackBerry. But we do support, general open standards, and just, developing sites, especially for WebKit, they're supported and can run on our platform.
I think we've got time for one. Okay. Ooh. Oh, this is Michael's question. Yes, it appears nowadays that browser manufacturers are introducing many proprietary features with more to come. Is it worth implementing browser-specific, like proprietary browser features, or if you're interested in a consistent user experience, should you go more for the features that are supported cross-browser? I guess is what that's asking.
Which features?
Well, it depends what you mean by proprietary, right? But way back in the browser wars, like long before some of you were even born, I'm sure. Netscape and Microsoft were competing, and what they would do is they would implement a feature. They wouldn't necessarily document it as a standard or how its quirks work. They just say, here's this thing, you can do this cool thing, use our browser, it's cooler because it does this cool thing, right? That is a mile away from the situation we have now, where we have Opera and Safari and Firefox and other people, and even Microsoft a bit, collaborating together in the W3C to produce standards that everybody implements. And browsers experiment with stuff, because that's part of the standards development process, and we do our best to prefix it and keep it out of the way, so when the real standard comes along, you don't end up trying to use the real standard and breaking in the older browsers which did it a different way because they were like trying something out. So the model of standards development we have now is one that's much better for the web than the old one. And so when we implement stuff like the audio data API, which no one else has, right? We keep it out of the way, we play with it, we do cool stuff with it, and then we say to you guys, what do you guys think? And they go, well, that's cool, but actually this API is a bit skewy, and we go, well, okay, we'll fix that, and so on and so forth. And there's a development process, and I think that's so much better for the web than the old days.
Yeah, Chrome is experimenting with stuff, implementing this if we think we like it. They do the same thing, But the thing is, don't forget something. The way it works is not the standard specification, then the browser, then the web developer. It's not working this way at all. It's like a triangle. Okay, we're all working together. It's just a mess. I know that. It's hard. Sometimes, okay, we have, I don't know, a feature like request animation frame. The first time I announced this feature on our blog, we say, okay, it's an experiment. Play with it. Don't use it in production. Play with it. Tell us what you think. And we got really good feedbacks. And we wrote a specification. The WebKit implements this feature, right? Same thing with gradients. It's the way it works. So proprietary features, it's not that. It's just new features, just new. And the way it works, it's very healthy. What do you think? I think
it is, like you say, it's messy because the real world is messy, but it's the way it has to be. It's a recognition that you can't just write a standard up front. You have to get developers to use it and see what they want to do with it, and that's where developers, like everyone here, can get involved with that whole process as well and feed back what you actually want to see in the APIs.
Yeah.
And what you'll notice, for instance, with Chrome, and I'm sure it's the same with the other browsers, you'll actually see, if you look at the names on the standards, people who are writing the standards are the same people who are doing the code for the browsers. It's a tight process, and they're iterating between the two.
To a small degree, sometimes I blame people like Paul, who comes along here with this siren song of the audio data API, and everyone gets really excited. No, seriously,
Yeah.
it's not his fault.
But
it's like he says, it's a triangle.
There's one thing. Just one thing.
But some things we talk about aren't ready for deploying on the websites which have to work everywhere.
There's one proprietary feature, which is you should not use. It's plugins, like Silverlight, for example. This is a proprietary feature you're not supposed to use. And this could be a problem. But things like open video, like the feature we're all working on, this is good stuff.
I was just going to add that it's pretty much impossible for it not to be messy, given that we have to design stuff out in the open by committee, quite largely. So it's a very difficult process, you know. And I've never actually been to any working group meetings, but from what I hear, you know, they just move at a glacial pace, and it takes a very long time. But then there's the other approach, of course, where browsers just go, I want to implement this really awesome thing, and then try and shoehorn it into the spec afterwards, mentioning no names. Which is a bit dubious, but then again, it still produces really cool features and helps to innovate and drive the web forward, and we all seem to sort of get there eventually with a lot of the major features.
Forget that XML HTTP request, without which we wouldn't have the web we've got now, is a Microsoft proprietary extension to the web browser.
Yep. It's a very cool thing with a desperately inappropriate name. No one uses it for XML. And for goodness sake, consistent capitalization on API names for the win.
Okay, well, that will have to be our last question, because I'm getting thirsty. I want to go to the pub. So, one last question. I forgot about this, right? What's behind the little hatches on the Chrome logo? Lasers?
Yes, lasers.
Thank you.
And sharks. Tell me it's sharks.
Okay, you'll have to speak to the Chrome UX team for that.
Okay, thank you very much to our speakers for coming along today. Thank you all for coming along today. There should be another set of slides on there with the important information, like where the pub is.
Thank you, guys.
Doing that, somebody's won some DVDs, haven't they?
Thanks. I'll keep it short. I know everyone hates sponsor messages, but you're going to get one. We're here from top10.co. We're a London-based web app. We just started a month ago, and we're building a web app all about creating and sharing lists. So today we've been asking you guys to come and rank browsers and make your favorite list as to what you think of the top 10 browsers out there. And thanks for everyone that's done that. We can reveal the results for you now. So in 10th position was Flock. In 9th position was Midori. In 8th position, Lunascape. In 7, Maxthon. In 6th position, Camino. In 5th position, IE9. In 4, Opera. In 3, Safari. They're not here today. Boo. Number 2, Firefox. And proving that lasers do win, it's Chrome in number 1. So thank you, everyone. And we also had a prize for everyone that took part. So one person has won the top 10 sci-fi DVDs of all time, and that is Louis Remy. So, Louis, yep, do you want to come and grab that? Well done.
Okay. Oh yeah, nobody won the bingo. Anyone even get close?
Did anybody got more than 3 in a row? Oh.
Whoa.
4 in a row?
Can the panel just start shouting out buzzwords?
H264. Stop reading your list.
Bingo.
Bingo.
Coffee script. Was on some of the cards.
Quality.
I mentioned it briefly earlier, but yeah. Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much to our speakers, Terence Eden, Chris Mills, Michael Mahemoff, Paul Rouget, Laurent Goodnock. And again, a pity that Martin Beebe couldn't be here, and hope that his wife is recovering after her accident yesterday.
If you follow him on Twitter, he has been answering Q&A.
Yes, he has been answering questions on Twitter. So if you have a question about IE9 and you tag it, yeah, no, she's fine after the accident. I think just shaken up, but yeah. And are we gonna try and get him for a talk, maybe? There you go. So he'll record his talk and you can get it online. Thank you very much to our sponsors, Plus Lion. Jamie's actually here. Top 10, who ran the competition, 9web, Web Directions, who provided the App Media ticket, Ubelly, Campaign Monitor, and Squiz. And, oh God, I'm old and my glasses don't work. Incubator. I can't just barely make that out. Who have kindly... I can't do the color contrast there. Incubator very kindly streamed the video today. Yeah. Right, important information. We're going to the pilot.